so inevitable. Is this thing working? Yes, it is. Thank you very much for coming this morning. I'm really excited to talk about this topic this morning. This actually started in the Dominican Republic. This sermon began on our missions trip on the back of a truck. So, does anyone know about our missions trip? In January of every year, a group of us will go down to the Dominican Republic, and we'll go down there. We join a group called Meeting God in Missions, and we work with the teams down there, reaching out to people in the Dominican Republic, and especially Haitian immigrants who are working in the sugarcane fields. And it's an amazing opportunity. And one of the things that we do in the evenings, just during the day, and in the evenings we go out and we visit local churches. And one of the churches we visited is called the Cowboy Church. Has nothing to do with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not exactly sure the origin of the name, but it's out in the boonies. And to get there, you have to drive through these completely dark country roads. And the amazing thing is, as you're driving along, you look up, and the sky is absolutely full of stars. More stars than you will ever see anywhere in your life. And it's very different from central New Jersey. So I couldn't find, you go on Google and say, Central New Jersey night sky. Well, there's a reason why there's not a picture of it. So, question for you is, what's the difference? Is this the same sky or is this a different sky? Who says it's the same? Who says it's different? It is the same sky. Why is it different? The difference is the pollution. The difference is the light pollution, the things that are keeping us from seeing the sky as it really is. Which sky is true? Which sky is the one that really exists? The one on the right or the one on the left? The one on the right, exactly. And all of these things, and what the sermon really started on the back of the truck, realizing as I looked up and I saw all of those stars, that's the way the sky really is. And I looked up at into the sky in New Jersey, and it was different. It wasn't that way. And realizing that's the way God really is. That God is really awesome and impressive and glorious. And sometimes when I'm in my life in New Jersey, I don't see that. I don't experience that. So why is it? What is God really like? We get overwhelmed, we get distracted. There's all this stuff going on in our life. And a great reason to go to the Dominican Republic. The group that we go with, by the way, is called Meeting God in Missions. If ever there was a group that was named the right thing, it's Meeting God in Missions. You think about going on a missions trip and it's like, oh, serving God and helping people. And yeah, that happens. But one thing you do when you were there is you meet the God of that night sky. You meet the God who is awesome and incredible. So we really, when you're there, you really see him as he is. So it's really important for us to know him as he is. And we have two concepts of God. We have on one hand, God who is huge, who is powerful, who is distant even, who is just almost beyond our comprehension. He's so big, he's just awesome and glorious. On the other hand, we have a God who is close, who is intimate. Almost sometimes we can feel like almost like a buddy. We can sort of almost make God into an ATM card. We need God to pull him out, swipe, and we're good. All right? But God is not to be trifled with. God is more than an ATM card, but he's also not distant. So the idea of God being both overwhelming and incredible and powerful and glorious and being very, very close is really the topic of this talk. Bigger than big and closer than close. What's the most important thing about us is our concept of God. A.W. Tozer, and a great writer for the Christian Missionary Alliance, incredible author. If you get a chance to read his stuff, it will really shake your world. He says, what comes to mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Who do you say God is? Who do you experience God to be? Who is this God that we worship? That's the most important thing about you. And when we talk about this idea of God being huge and glorious and powerful and majestic and all-knowing, and then on the other hand we talk about God being very close and intimate, one of the places in the Bible where we see that most clearly is Isaiah 40. So let's take a look. And we're going to jump around through Isaiah 40, back and forth in different verses. But one of the things I do also is I work with the men's group. One of the things I've experienced in the men's group is the power of God's word. So when we, in the men's group, we just put God's word out there, and we read a verse or we read it aloud, God works. God changes hearts. Men's hearts are stirred. And my hope today is that as we are looking in God's word, and we jump around and we'll read these verses, that God will use his verses, use his word in our hearts, that he'll be built up and he'll be glorified today. So, let's take a look. So God is bigger than big. So in verse 27 in Isaiah 40, God says, "Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, my cause is disregarded by my God? Do you not know? Have you not heard the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth? He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." This is an amazing promise of God. So, let's take a look. Let's dig down into that. Well, what is it? In those verses, we see God as being bigger than big, and God as being closer to close. Isaiah tries to do the impossible. He tries to describe who God is. And Isaiah 40, just wanted to put this into context. The book of Isaiah was written in the 8th century BC. And the first 39 chapters or so are really focusing on God's judgment. And there's some really tough stuff in there for the people of Israel. And now, even though it was written in the 8th century, he's giving a prophecy ahead to the return of the exiles from the Babylonian captivity. And he switches over to words of comfort. And you'll find in this chapter, it's one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible, incredible words of comfort and incredible words of who God really is. So, let's look at God. It's bigger than big. How does Isaiah describe him? He says, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, creator of the ends of the earth. He doesn't grow tired, and his understanding no one can fathom." Here's what Isaiah says about him. Okay, who are you going to compare God to? Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? How big is that? The breadth of his hand marked out the heavens. All right? How big is your God? Is your God, when you think about God, remember, what you think about God is the most important thing about you. Do you think about God this way? Do you think about him being so powerful? When you stand on the beach and you look at the ocean, he's got it in the palm of it, the hollow of his hand. And you stand at the beach and you look at the sky stretching out, and God's just, he's measured it out. He's that big. Or who has held the dust of the earth in a basket? In a basket. God is bigger than the Sahara Desert. He's bigger than all of that. Is that how you see God? Or weighed the mountains on scales and the hills in a balance. How big are the biggest mountains? We've been to the Rockies. How big are they? God is bigger than that. What we think about God is the most important thing about us. So what about the world? Surely the nations are like a drop in the bucket. They're regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. So the nations are like a drop in the bucket. The Roman Empire, come and gone. Persian Empire, come and gone. Chinese empires, come and gone. Ottoman Empire, come and gone. America, Russia, ISIS, a drop in the bucket. They're nothing. And they're like dust on the scales, okay? Who of you, if you want to go weigh yourself in the morning, hey, got your scale, you get down on your hands and your knees, you go, and you blow the dust off the scale just to make sure. I mean, that's how God treats these great empires. They're like nothing. Nothing can slow down this God. He's so amazingly huge. This is God who has all power. He is big. He is forever. He is eternal. He is glorious. So what about another testimony to him? He says, okay, if you're not convinced, Isaiah says, take a look. Lift up your eyes. Look at the heavens. Who made all these things? Who made those billions of galaxies, those stars, the Milky Way, all of those things that we see? He brings the starry host out one by one. One by one. Okay, how many one by ones are there? Can you count them all? No, but he calls each one by name. That's an amazing mental ability. None of us are like that. This is a God who is absolutely indescribable, incomprehensible. He's beyond what we can imagine. But Isaiah is trying to give us this idea that he's bigger than big. He's bigger than big. And because of his great power and his mighty strength, not one of them is missing. So God not only has created all of this, God is not only bigger than all of this, but he's sustaining all of this. He's a sustainer, creator, sustainer, overall. But then, we're talking about God's power, but what about his wisdom? What does God know? Who can fathom the Spirit of the Lord? You figure out, do you understand everything that God knows? Can you really comprehend who he is? Who instructed the Lord as his counselor? Who gives God advice? Nobody. What's the one thing that God can't do? Learn something. He's not going to learn anything. He knows it all. He's perfect in his knowledge. He's not going to be surprised. God will never say, oh, I wasn't expecting that. God's not going to say, let me get back to you. I've never heard of that before. Or God's not going to say, that's a tricky one. God is infinite in his ability, in his understanding. To whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him? God never had a teacher. God doesn't need a PhD. God is smarter than smart, wiser than wise. Who was it who taught him knowledge? Who showed him the path of understanding? So, who are you going to compare God to? This is a huge, incomprehensible, all-knowing, all-able, all-wise God. Who are you going to compare him to? This is why I come back to the idea of God being an ATM card, of God being our big man in the sky. This is not the big man in the sky. This is a holy God. And a God like this, actually, a writer described a God like this as plutonium. He's awesome. He's perfect. He's holy. Holy means you can't even get near to him. You can't even get near to him because he is so amazingly strong. He is so amazingly pure. People say, well, why doesn't God come to earth? Why doesn't God come and just solve all this mess? It would be like 1,000 million nuclear devices going off at once. Everything would be consumed. He is just so unapproachable. And yet, as we'll see in a moment, he's closer than close. How can this be? How can this be? So who are you going to compare him to? In Isaiah, I don't have the verses here, but he goes and he makes some absolutely hysterical comparisons to people who sort of set up idols. You know, you carve something out of wood and you nail it to the ground so it doesn't fall over. That's my God. That's not this God. Be careful of dumbing God down, of making him to fit who you think he is. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. So be in awe of his holiness. You read in Isaiah how awesome he is, how worthy he is of our praise. But at the same time, in all of this, God is also closer than close. How can this be? This is amazing. So we go back to our verses. Do you know? Have you not heard? We've just seen. He's the everlasting God. We were just singing about this, in fact. He's the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He doesn't grow tired. He's a sustainer. He calls all those stars by name. He keeps them there. Does God take a day off? He doesn't need a day off. And his understanding, no one can fathom. So here we've got this amazing God, bigger than big. So what is it? So what does he do? He says, you better obey me. You better follow me. You better fear me. No. What is the next thing that it says here? He gives. He gives. It's amazing. You have the all-powerful, all-sustaining God. And what does he do? He gives. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. Those words sound familiar to you? He gives. John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave. Love gives. God gives. So not only is he bigger than big, awesome and holy, but he's also closer than close. And he gives. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. That's us. And one of the most beautiful examples of this, and I'm jumping around in Isaiah because Isaiah describes God better than anyone, I think, is Isaiah 40:11. So who is this God who is closer than close? In the middle of everything that he's talked about God being awesome, and just distant almost, and majestic, and all-knowing and perfect, he turns and he says, God is closer than close. This is a verse that was really dear when I was with the navigators in Hungary. The leader of our group, they had 2 small kids. And this was her verse that she claimed. That God tends his flock. This is the same amazing, perfect, all-powerful God. He tends his flock. He tends. Wait a minute. Is God distant? No, he's closer than close. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers his lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Amen. Your flock. Who is his flock? It's us, guys. It's us. We are his flock, beloved. He loves us. This God, who is perfect, who is holy, who doesn't need us, loves us. He's giving to us. And he tends his flock like a shepherd. We have the good shepherd. He's given us access to God himself. God has given us access to him through Jesus Christ. So we have all of these things. So we can approach this God who is so huge and so perfect, and is now closer than close. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. Do you realize how close he is? Do you realize how much he loves you? That he's tending his flock like a shepherd. He's active. He's looking out. He's going after his sheep. He's watching out for them. He's providing for them. Think about Psalm 23. He provides a table in the midst of my enemies. He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death. He provides for me. He protects us. But what about this? I mean, the one thing about sheep, and I think there might have been a talk on this. It might have been Glenn, actually, who mentioned this in one of his sermons. Sheep are incredibly stupid. Okay? They're really should probably do a whole sermon on sheep. They're probably one of the dumbest animals ever created. They wander off. They fall into holes. They just do all kinds of things. God is patient with us. He knows this. He knows this. And the lambs are the little ones, the clueless ones, the hurt ones, the scared ones. Are you scared? Are you hurting? Are you wandering? Are you unsure? Not only is he gathering, he's not going and grabbing you by the neck and pulling you back. He's gathering you in his arms. And not only is he gathering you in his arms, this awesome God who made the world, this awesome God who sustains the world, this awesome God who's perfect in his knowledge, is also perfect in his love. And he carries them. How? He carries us. He carries you. How? Close to his heart. Close to his heart. God is not far. God is not far. He is closer than close. And he gently leads those with young. If you have kids, this is the verse like for all moms. He gently leads those that have young. He gets it. He knows what it's like. He loves you. God is closer than close. So, in Isaiah, I love this logic. So, okay, we've just looked at God being huge, all-powerful, closer than close, loving, tender. What do we say in our heads? Again, this comes back to the concept. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, my cause is disregarded by my God? My way is hidden from the Lord. God can't see me. He doesn't know. He's just not able. I think Isaiah has shown us that that's nonsense. God is bigger than big. There is nothing too hard for God. Or, my cause is disregarded by my God. He's too busy. He doesn't care. I'm not important. Oh, you are. More than you will know. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. Nothing is hidden from him. He knows all. And he cares very, very deeply. One of the things that Pastor Mark has said, Glenn has said, and I'm going to say, is the most important thing about if you want to know who this God is, you want to have that night sky as it really is in your life, you've got to go to God's Word. That's the place where you really find out who he really is. And Isaiah, who else, mentions why this is important. He says, the grass withers, the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. These promises that were made to Isaiah in the 8th century BC are as fresh and as relevant today as they were then. If I can say, if there's a word to describe a God who is bigger than big, able to do all things, closer than close, the word is relevant. So if you're hurting, if there's pain, if you're heartbroken, if you feel like a lamb, you feel clueless, you feel vulnerable, you feel like you're overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, God is here. He's bigger than big, and he's closer than close. So one of the things that's so important, and the reason why I mention this point here, is it's really important to make sure that your night sky doesn't become the Jersey sky, but your night sky becomes the biblical sky. You see God as he really is. And one of the key things to do for that is to meet with him every day. And I discovered that I have a very stressful, I didn't discover I have a stressful job. I know I have a stressful job. But I've discovered the difference when I wake up in the morning. My main office is in England, and so they're 5 hours ahead. So my cell phone is already full of about 30 or 40 messages of crises, of stuff. So the temptation for me is to pick up the phone and see what's happening in England. And when I do that, the stars disappear from my sky. I start getting overwhelmed by the distractions of the world. But I've said, wait a minute, I'm not going to read my email. In fact, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to surf the web. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go to God first. And when I do, I've got perspective. And I see not just God as he is, but I see my world as it really is. So spending time with God, with God's world, God's word, putting him first is the key to seeing God as he really is. So these are some very, very familiar verses. We're going to finish up by looking at this. In fact, we sang about this last week. So even youths grow tired and weary, the young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord, some translations say wait on the Lord, will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Here comes the bigger than big God to become closer than close. My favorite words in this passage, it occurs 4 times, the word will. Will. Who says will? God says will. How do we know? This is the God who is eternal. This is the God who is awesome, who holds the waters in the palm of his hand, the God who measures mountains as if they were just a little thing to put on the scale. The God who is infinite in his wisdom, who never needed a teacher, is closer than close. So, what does he say is going to happen? He says that we will soar on wings like eagles. We will run and not grow weary. We will walk and not be faint. This is weird. If I were writing this, I would have done it differently. Why is it? For me, this is like backwards, right? It's like, if God's giving me something, and I'm thinking, but it's slowing down. I'm going from flying to running to walking. It's like, I feel like I'm just dragging myself across the finish line, right? It's like, that's not very uplifting. It's like, surely there must be a mistake here. Because I would, if I were writing, and I would say, okay, I'm walking, and now I'm running, and now I believe I can fly. I'm taking off, right? That's the way I would do it. But But the point is, whose strength is this? This isn't my strength. This is God's strength. The God who created all of those stars, who sustains them in place, the God who is all-wise, who is closer than close. He gives, and he's giving you his strength. So what I think this means is when God gives you his strength, he's not going to give you it bit by bit. He gives you his strength. And when you have his strength, you soar. He's promised to give you his strength and you will soar. When Mari and I went bird watching, we were there and the guy who was our guide said, can you see the eagle? We looked up and there was an eagle. I guess they go about like 10,000, 15,000 feet. They're huge wingspans, and you can see this tiny little dot up there. But there he was, soaring. When you soar on wings like eagle, you are being lifted up, but you also have a perspective. You see the world as it is. You put things into perspective. You're not saying, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. God will give you his view. God will give you his peace. God will allow you to rise above it. He gives you the bird's eye view, so to speak. And then God says, you'll run and not grow weary. This is the tremendous promise. Paul talks about running the race, running the good race. And often, our race that we're to run is our mission in life. What has God called you, called me, called us to do? He will provide that for us. He will give us the strength to run the race. What on earth are we here for? Glenn was talking about our series coming up in a few weeks. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to find out exactly the same thing. To find out exactly what is it that God has planned for you. And you will walk and not grow weary. Sometimes it's the day-to-day drudgery. Sometimes it's that person at work. Sometimes it's just that nagging fear. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it is things that drag us down. But God will talk about our daily walk. We will be able to walk and not be weary. So how does that happen? It's those who hope in the Lord, wait on the Lord. What does that mean? Does that mean just sort of, you sit there and the Jeopardy theme plays? No. Waiting on the Lord is active. It means seeking him. It means going after him. And actually, it means surrendering to him. This is one of the things, again, we learned in the Dominican Republic, is surrendering to God. It's only when you surrender and you say, God, it's on your terms. Only when you open your hands can something be let go and you can get something else. He gives and he takes away. So sometimes he has to take away before he can give. So those who hope on the Lord renew their strength. So hoping in the Lord, by waiting on the Lord, it's surrendering, it's giving up my view and saying, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And it's positioning yourself under God's waterfall of grace. When he gives, God isn't a miser. When he gives, God has riches of grace, which are coming at us like a waterfall. It's putting yourself there. It's putting aside our prejudices, putting aside our puny, silly idea of God. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. It's understanding who he is, surrendering to God in his majesty and his ability and his love. That will make all the difference. That will give us the strength. So God is bigger than big. God is closer to close. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. Let's pray.